What is up? Welcome to Hawk Soups Podcast. This is the first episode of a new venture, a new form of content that I'm trying to tackle. Listen, first off, you can say, well, Hawk, why are you trying to start a podcast? Because I had myself this same question. I ain't going to front. Little bit of inspiration from Kenny Beecham. Shout out to him. He started his podcast by himself last couple of weeks. He started as not an NBA podcast, and now he's just fully on calling it a Kenny Beecham pod. And I like the way that's been flowing. It's been something that I think I've wanted to do for a while now. I haven't seen many people do it, have a podcast by themselves that's been successful. And sometimes when you see somebody do it and you think, okay, well, shoot, I'm gonna go ahead and give it a shot too. So we're here for now. We'll see. Y'all know me. We'll see how long it goes, but we're here for now. I plan on keeping this going throughout the season. I just want to do content differently this season. A couple of reasons why. The first one is I have thoughts that are usually longer than 60 seconds in a TikTok. I do enjoy making TikToks. That's honestly where I started making content, at least this last couple of years, started making content about NBA, is TikTok format. It's just what worked for me when I first started. But now I want to talk more, talk longer, get a little more in depth on things. And sometimes I feel a little constrained doing that within just 60 seconds. What about the lives, you may be asking? I don't think they're going away. I think they're just going to maybe look a little different, maybe a little less frequent. Lives might be a little more reactionary, more interactive with you guys. The lives over the last couple of months have more so been, honestly, they felt to me like a live podcast. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think just some of it couldn't always get my points across the way I wanted to. And honestly, the lives having to be late after work, just the way my schedule works, it was easier for me to be able to just shoot a podcast and tackle this new venture. The lives aren't going away. They might shift more to like TikTok, so I think they can be a little bit more interactive over there to keep that community going. Because I do enjoy the TikTok community. I do enjoy going live on TikTok. Might do more lives after games, like game reactions. So they might not be the hour and a half lives we're used to. I might just be live for 15, 20 minutes because I want to talk about what we saw in the game right after the game. I don't know if that's going to be YouTube. I don't know if it's going to be on TikTok. We'll see. We're going as we go. We're planning as we go. We're playing it by ear. But today we're in the preseason. We're knee deep in the preseason. Almost every team has played at least 2 games. And I want to talk about what I've been seeing over the last couple of games. Now, full disclosure, no, I have not seen every game. No, we're not going to talk about every team today. Today's podcast might feel a little ESPN-y because honestly, I haven't talked in a while. So a lot of my thoughts are on the big name teams. It's on the teams that made the big trades. It's the teams that everyone always talks about. And some of it I have similar maybe thoughts that are already out there. And some of the things I think are just different or how I'm looking at it. As we go on, next podcast, we might get into some more nitty gritty stuff, talk about like random Detroit Pistons or what are the Charlotte Hornets doing. Like we'll get into more of the deep dive stuff because I can usually find something positive to talk about, or at least something interesting to me about every NBA team. We're not doing every NBA team today. So if that was what you're looking for, hate to disappoint, it's going to feel like ESPN today. We're doing Warriors, we're doing Lakers, we're doing Celtics, we're talking about my Sixers, we're talking about Wemby, we're talking about Chet. Like it's going to feel like ESPN today. But appreciate you for pulling up. You know, if it's your first time listener, if you're a return listener, appreciate you for pulling up. Some housekeeping stuff before we get into it. Podcast can be found right here on YouTube. It's the same Hawk Soups YouTube that we've been on rocking with for the last couple of years. You can find it there. But the audio version for audio listeners, if that's something that you're interested in, because I know myself, I'm a huge audio guy when it comes to podcasts. I like both the video and audio, but it's a lot of podcasts I listen on both platforms. It just depends on what I'm doing when I want to hear what they got to say. So audio you can find obviously Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, wherever you find your podcast, you should be able to find this. Just Google Hawk Soups Podcast or Hawk Soups. The links will be down in the description below, of course. So without further ado, let's get into this. So like I said, we're deep into the preseason. I want to talk about what I saw. The Warriors and Lakers played a couple of days ago. I want to talk about that first, more so from the Warriors side, and then we'll talk about the Lakers. I feel weirdly high on the Lakers, and I don't know how that feels internally getting through that, but I feel high on the Lakers. I got some questions, but I'm high on them. I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off on that, spoiler alert. But for the Warriors, so the Warriors added Chris Paul. The Warriors, Steve Kerr says, I want to play Klay Thompson at the 4. They did that. They started a game with Klay Thompson at the 4. They have Andrew Wiggins out there. Looney was out there. Wiggins, Looney, Clay, and then it was Chris Paul and Steph Curry. I don't know how I feel about the Warriors. And it feels weird saying that, knowing that, they had this era, this dynasty run where they win 3 championships in 4 or 5 seasons. The Kevin Durant years was there. After Kevin Durant was there, they go and win in 2022. But truthfully, I don't know how I feel about the Warriors. I don't like what I've seen so far from them. Just flat out rip, I don't like what I've seen so far of them. They feel small. I know I made this TikTok a while ago. We talked about it a couple weeks ago that, Klay Thompson can guard some fours. They can play the fours. And not necessarily they feel small in the sense of what's their interior defensive situation would look like, of how well they protect the paint, how well they protect the rim. I'm concerned about their rebounding. Now, granted, against the Lakers, they rebounded fine. When I was watching that game, I was worried. Looking at one point, I'm like, Dario Saric is their backup center. Like, he's going to be getting a lot of minutes at the backup 5 position or backup 4. He's not the best rebounder. I love his game. He's a solid passer. I'm excited to see what he can do, and some dribble handoff stuff, some passing out of the short roll stuff, kind of a lesser version of an offensive hub that Draymond Green is, that Sabonis type is. But they're not a great rebounder. But the Warriors didn't seem to have an issue against the Lakers in the first half when it comes to rebounding. And why I'm saying specifically the first half is because that's when most of their guys were going to get a lot of minutes stopped playing for both teams. Warriors ended the first half of that game with 16 rebounds. Lakers ended the first half of that game with 19. When it comes to Chris Paul, honestly, I'm still figuring out how well he's going to fit on the Warriors. I think on paper, if you boot up 2K, not that it makes sense, but I think you could make it work. In real life, I'm really curious to see how well this does. At least in these first couple of games we've seen of the Warriors, with him starting alongside Steph Curry, it looks like he's still figuring out. It looks like they're still figuring it out. He was 2 for 6 against the Warriors. He made 2 threes. Those are his 2 made field goals. He had a moment where he ended up getting switched on Rui Hachimura and got bullied in the paint, and it didn't look good. I think they're going to have to bring him off the bench. I think they're going to have to get to the point where they realize, at least so far, things can change. But based on the first couple of games I've seen of them, it's looking like he'd be better coming off the bench. They look really small with Chris Paul and Steph Curry in that backcourt. There was a nice little moment where little dribble handoff between him and Steph. Steph goes for the drive in, kicks it back out to Chris, relocates off the pin down off from Looney. Chris swings it over to Steph, wide open 3. Nice little transition play. Chris bringing up the court, kicks it to Steph on the left wing. Steph knocks down the 3. So there have been a couple of nice moments, but there's also been a lot of moments where it doesn't feel like it's working for me. I'm hesitant to say that the Warrior, we'll see. I haven't decided. What I mean to say is this. I haven't decided if I'm going to do a rankings yet or predictions of standings. We probably will. They're fun. I enjoy doing them. It gives me opportunity to talk about everybody. I don't take them too seriously, but at least it gives me opportunity to talk about every team and at least have a mindset going into the season. You know where my mind's at going into the season. But when it comes to the Warriors, typically in past years, you feel comfortable placing them pretty high. Like I said, I haven't made my standings yet, but I don't know how high I'd place the Warriors. I don't feel confident in the Warriors. What I've seen from them so far doesn't make me really confident in them. I'll say that. Like I said, we were watching the Lakers and Warriors game. Let's talk about these Los Angeles Lakers. I like what they did. I have some questions, and we'll get to my questions for them, but I really like the roster they built for the Los Angeles Lakers. They got plenty of shooters. They got a lot of wings that can play the 3, play the 4, a little switchable. I like the addition of Gabe Vincent. He looked good against the Sacramento Kings. Christian Wood looks good against the Kings. Hit some 3s, hit some mid-rangers. He was 5 for 8 against the Warriors, had 13 points. Taurean Prince, I'll be honest, forgot they picked him up. A really solid pickup for them. He seems like the perfect guy for the Lakers to be on a LeBron James team. He's a big wing. He can play a couple of different positions. He'll knock down an open 3. He can play some solid defense. I like what they did in terms of the bigs that they have. Rui's there still. I like the bigs. I like the wings. My question is point guard responsibilities. Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell have looked good in their first couple of games. I'll give you that. They have looked good. Both have had some positives. They both look good attacking the basket. Reeves, D'Lo, when he attacks the basket, it feels like, at least so far, what I've seen so far this season, he feels like he's going around the basket. A lot of scoop layups, a lot of high off the backboard, like little far off to the left or far off to the right of the actual basket, and finishing over defenders. Where Reeves, so far on at least the drives I've seen, feels like he's attacking directly to the basket. Might be just because he has a bigger body, a little stronger, different styles of play. Both looked good against the Warriors. Reeves had 16 points. He was 6 for 9. Russell had 12 points. He was 5 for 8, 2 for 4 from 3. My question for both of these guys, or just the Lakers in general, so far at least, both Reeves and Russell have felt like scorers and good at attacking the basket, knocking down open shots, and scoring. My biggest question for the Lakers is, where's the extra playmaking coming from? Yes, you have LeBron James in your team, one of the best playmakers in the league, one of the best playmakers of all time. When he's not on the court, who's the playmaking responsibility is going to fall to? Is it D'Lo? Is it Vincent? Is it Reeves? In my mind, none of those guys are great playmakers. They can make passes. They can make smart passes. But to me, at least, they're not excellent ball mover, set the table guys. I'm very curious to see, first couple of months in the season, first couple of weeks into the season, who steps up to take on some of that playmaking responsibility when LeBron James isn't on the floor. And honestly, even when he is on the floor, because we've seen I don't think the Lakers' key to regular season success is LeBron James playing point guard all season long. I think that's going to burn him out. You're going to look up, and it's going to become playoff time, and he's either going to be A, injured, or B, tired, because he had to take on such a big playmaking role throughout the entire season. Now, when it comes to the playoffs, honestly, I really like this Lakers roster for the playoffs, because a lot of teams shrink those rotations anyway, keep the ball in LeBron James's hands, and let him go to work with all these shooters around him. Playoffs, I like this Lakers team a lot. But we're talking 82-game regular season right now. And for an 82-game regular season, they're going to need somebody else to step up in the playmaking department. Like I said earlier, I like the forward and big depth. I like the versatility that they have. But I'm excited, and I have a big question mark on what that guard rotation is going to look like in terms of setting the table for others when LeBron James isn't on the floor. But shout out to the Lakers, because so far what they did looks good. Like, what they built so far looks good. Continuing on from the Lakers, we talked about their game against the Kings. I don't have a ton of notes for the Kings as one of my teams that I was like, I love the Kings a lot, but they don't get a lot of they're not getting a lot of love on this podcast today. One thing I do want to say about the Kings, I think the JaVale McGee pickup was really, really good. They needed a backup big, I think, that had a little bit more energy, a little bit more verticality to him than Sabonis. Not that JaVale McGee at this age has a ton of verticality, but considering what was available on the market when they made their move, I like to pick up a JaVale. And in that game against the Lakers, he looked good. He did what I thought he was going to do. He showed up with some energy, 8 points, 4 rebounds, had a block, and only 15 minutes of play. That's a solid 15 minutes. If he can continue to do that for them on a night-to-night basis, 15, 20 minutes of solid play, just to give Sabonis some rest and have someone that they can count on when Sabonis is on the court. Yes, I know they still have Alex Len, but JaVale just brings something different. He's going to bring energy that I think they need, and that's going to be good for them. All right, let's transition on and talk about Wemby. Victor Wembanyama has been one of the most polarizing pieces I've seen over the last couple of years when it comes to the NBA prospects. Part of it is obviously, yes, as we all know, ESPN, Bleacher Report, everybody went crazy with the best prospect of all time, best prospect since LeBron James, which that in itself is ESPN loves to predict, and we'll talk about the ESPN prediction rankings later, but ESPN loves to predict. So when you just start ranking people based on prospects and talking about people as players and what they can be, it garners a lot of hype. And then with a lot of hype comes a lot of criticism. But so far in Wemby's first couple of games that we've seen, 1 against the Heat and 2 against the OKC Thunder and Chet, he's looked really, really good. He's looked surprisingly good. I think he surprised a lot of people how good he has looked. He's been one of the couple of things that have surprised me. Just notes as I was watching these games. Surprisingly good shot defender. Like, just being able to cover a lot of ground. You think you have an open shot. Wemby takes a step, and then he's there to either contest it or block it. He blocked a couple of 3-point attempts. Got a couple of blocks at the rim. Looked really good defensively. Just in his ability to seemingly be out of position, but then with one step or two, he's right there because it's just his length. Offensively, also looked really good. I'm still curious, and I'm going to end up watching a lot of Spurs games because I really want to see how Pop uses him. And the first game against OKC Thunder, at times it felt like he was cherry picking a little bit. He was guarding the 3-point line a lot. Who they had him guarding just happened to be on the 3-point line, and he seemed to get a couple of fast breaks like back to back. And it felt a little cherry picky-ish. It was that first game against the Thunder. I didn't feel that much against the Heat, so maybe Pop was like, yo, like, don't leak out as much so quickly, because there was times where he leaked out, OKC got the offensive rebound, and then they're playing 5-on-4. He looked good in pick and pop, looked good in pick and roll. There was a lot of moments where he's bringing the ball up the court himself, hitting the move. He got to that mid-range free throw line jumper a lot over these 2 games where he was knocking down some good shots, hit a couple of threes. He had that crazy play where he dunked over Thomas Bryant, and Thomas Bryant was looking like, yo, he dunked that? He had the pick and roll where he called for the lob at the 3-point line, and his feet barely got off the ground, but he dunked it, and he leapt from maybe they'll say a foot or two from within the free throw line, but he called for the lob at the 3-point line. Just throw it up there, and I'll go get it. 22 points, 10 for 15 against the Heat, and then he had 20 points. He was 8 for 13 against Chet and the Thunder. My biggest question for Wemby is, what position is he going to play? Because so far what we've seen from him in these 2 games, he did guard Chet and he did guard Thomas Bryant. Bam didn't play when they were against the Miami Heat. But it didn't feel like I was watching a center, if you will. Because of just how he plays on the offensive side of the ball, it didn't feel like I was guarding a center. Gets the ball on the 3-point line, might go to work. They did run a couple of pin downs for him, a couple of pick and rolls, pick and pop situations where he would catch it in the mid post or let him operate in the mid post, and he would get to that free throw line jumper that we talked about. But my biggest concern and biggest question mark for Wemby and how the Spurs are going to use him, he hasn't seemed like a good rebounder yet. He did have that offensive rebound off the free throw where he basically caught it and dunked it right away. That he has those moments where if he gets the rebound, it's a quick offensive rebound for a dunk. But in terms of just actual rebounding, we haven't really seen that yet. He had 4 rebounds against the Heat, and he had 4 rebounds against the Thunder. And yes, those are only 20 minutes he played. You extrapolate that over, play 38, 40 minutes. I don't think he's going to play that much. 35 minutes, we'll say. What he's going to end the game with 7, 8, 6 rebounds. It is not striking me, at least so far, as a great rebounder. And in terms of how that's going to affect their team and team rebounders and getting stops and being able to be a good rebounding team. Good defensive teams are good rebounding teams. That's something I just live by. Spurs against the Heat, 35 team rebounds. The Heat, 50 team rebounds. The Spurs have to figure out how they're going to rebound. And part of figuring out how they're going to rebound is figuring out what position you're going to have Wemby play at. Because if Wemby's the 5, you need him to grab rebounds. If Wemby's the 3, maybe I think that's the farthest position, farthest away from the 5 that you can put him. If you could put him maybe at small forward, maybe power forward. But if he's a 3, if he's the 4, whoever you have in at 5 has to gobble up some rebounds. That's my biggest concern for the Spurs and Victor Wembanyama. What's the rebounding numbers going to look like? Because he surprised me with some of his playmaking. He had 6 assists against the Thunder, which led the team in assists, but he also had 4 turnovers, which also led the team in turnovers. He had 4 assists against the Miami Heat. I think he was second in assists that night. The other not concerning thing, but I don't know if we're going to see this every night, only because in both of these games, he led those teams in shots. And it was kind of I think in the Thunder game, I always pronounce his name, Jeremy Shohan, had almost the same amount of field goal attempts, but it was Victor at 15, and then it was like 7, 5, 6, 8. Victor got by far the most shot attempts in both of these games, which makes sense. Number 1 overall pick, number 1 prospect. Just things that I'm curious to see if that's going to continue, or is Pop going to change it to get more guys, more shot attempts? Because if you're always looking for Victor, then the defense can hone in on Victor. Just things we're curious to see as the season continues on. I've liked what I saw from him the first 2 games. Don't get me wrong there. I definitely was impressed, liked what I saw. I just have some questions. Rebounding, shot selection, shots, dispersal, like the how many shot attempts is everybody going to take? Is Victor going to be 5, 6, 7 shot attempts above everybody all season long? What does that look like if so? Wish him health. So far he's looked good though. So far he has looked good. Chet, a couple of words about him real quick. 21 points against Victor, 9 rebounds. Just a comparison there. 7 for 10 from the field, 2 for 2 from 3. One of the things I noticed when I was watching Chet versus watching Victor, Chet looked like a center to me. Yes, he had some moments where he could shoot the ball, he put the ball on the floor, he could do a little bit of the ball handling as well, but Chet felt more like a center to me. Now, that was just the one game. I haven't seen much else of Chet in the preseason. I literally just watched that one Thunder Spurs game. But in that game, he more so looked like the center. Great finish around the rim. Really, really soft touch around the rim. Had a nice little spin lay, put back lay. Like, really soft touch around the rim. I'm excited to see what he can do as well. I want to shift gears, talk about my Sixers and the Celtics game. Specifically, the first game. Not necessarily the entire game. I want to talk about Kristaps Porzingis. I think for me, and I've talked about this for a couple of times, so you might be tired of me hearing it by now, but after that first game, the Sixers played the Celtics, when Kristaps was going off, I think more people are finally seeing what I was talking about all summer. Because all summer, I think the Kristaps Porzingis addition got downplayed a little bit because people wasn't watching Wizards games, which is understandable. There was no reason to really watch Wizards games last season. But Kristaps Porzingis brings a wrinkle to the Celtics that they haven't had before. They have a big who can pick and pop, which is something that Al Horford could do. But now when he picks and pops, he can pump fake and put the ball on the ground and go to the basket. We saw that against the Sixers. He can hit a nice little post fade. He has a post game that if they allow him, he can get to. He can go to. If Mazzulla throws some wrinkles in there to get a nice little mid post touch every couple of possessions or once a quarter, something like that to keep him engaged, that can be a nice wrinkle that they just haven't had yet. I loved that times we saw Kristaps and Al Horford on the floor together. I think that just adds a lot of spacing for the Celtics. Both of them are serviceable shooters. When they hot, and they have some, they might be able to go on a cold streak from time to time. But for the most part, both Kristaps and Al Horford are solid shooters. I like what he adds in the short roll. Well, Kristaps Porzingis is able to do in the short roll of catching the ball, passing out of it, catching the ball, pulling up for that mid-range, not having to roll all the way to the basket to be effective, to be a scorer. He just brings a lot to their team, being able to catch and shoot. In that game, their first game against the Sixers, he had 17 points. He was 5 for 7 from the field, 2 for 3 from 3, 5 for 8 from the free throw line. Now, granted, yes, Joel Embiid was not playing, but he looked confident. He looked good out there. He looked a part of the team. As weird as that sounds, sometimes when a new player gets added to a team, whether it be a trade or signing free agency, especially a player that's expected to have a big impact, like Kristaps is expected to come onto the Celtics team and have a big impact and contribute to winning. He's going to be inserted into the starting lineup. Sometimes there's a learning curve there. Sometimes there's a growth process, a growing pains that players have to go through. Sometimes they don't always look like they fit. To me, Kristaps Porzingis immediately looks like he fit on this team. Speaking of fit and confidence and looking like they belong, Peyton Pritchard looked good in those 2 games against the Celtics as well. I mean the Sixers as well. He also looked good in that game against the New York Knicks. He got paid this summer. I think he has the confidence. He knows he's going to be used more. One of the things he was complaining about last season was he wanted to be more involved. He wanted to be used more, be a part of the offense. He wanted a bigger role on the team. Well, now he has that, and he's not shying away from it. He's looking confident. He's getting to the basket well. He's pulling up for shots. He's making good passes when he does have the ball. And like I said before, it's not that they're going to ask Peyton Pritchard to I don't even honestly think they're going to ask him to step up to be a 6-man of the year type candidate role. But they are going to ask him to step up, that when he does come off the bench, to be an impactful player, because he's going to get a lot of minutes off the bench because they gave up a decent amount of guard depth to get Kristaps and to get Drew Holiday there. Drew looked good as well. We'll talk about him more in the future. But specifically, Peyton and Porzingis, they looked confident. They looked happy with their roles. And we haven't seen the Bucks at full strength yet. The Bucks, as the time I'm recording this Sunday, likely going to release it. Maybe Monday. I might release it Sunday night. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. Or at the very least Monday morning. So at the time, we haven't seen we haven't seen Dame and Giannis play together yet. But when these trades, all the trades, the dust settled from the Bucks trades and the Celtics trades, without seeing the Bucks play yet, And even before I saw the Celtics, I had the Celtics leaving the Eastern Conference and going to the finals. I think I like this team a little bit better than I like the Bucks so far on paper. We have to see what the Bucks look like. But a big piece for the Celtics were going to be, can Peyton Pritchard step up and give them some good guard depth? Can Kristaps Porzingis step up and fill the hole defensively that they're now going to have fill with Rob Williams missing, but also bring some offensive versatility that they haven't had? And so far, I'm getting yeses to all of those questions. Similar to what I said about Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker took all the shots. They both took 15 shots in the halves that they played. Only in the first half, they took 15 shots. Not a lot of other guys got a lot of looks. But the difference to me, and I think the difference that most people agree with, we know who Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are. The way that team is designed, they're supposed to get those shots because they're going to make those shots. So I'm not mad at them taking all those shots, just something I noticed. I'm curious to see as defenses start to hone in on them and try to get the ball out of their hands. Can other guys make shots when they're asked to? It's not like you can stop Kevin Durant or Devin Booker. You can just make it more difficult and try to keep the ball out of their hands. But I expect both of them to have a big load offensively and take a lot of shots. Granted, yes, Bradley Beal didn't play this game. So maybe when Beal's in, more shots are distributed evenly. But it's just something I noticed and thought was interesting. And the last thing before we get up out of here, and yes, I know this is probably a shorter podcast episode, but you know what I mean? First episode, I knew it was going to be shorter, but I didn't want to put off doing it. I wanted to just get it out there and do it. Well, I don't have a schedule yet. We just going to do these as they happen. You know what I mean? Appreciate you for rocking with me. But the last thing we want to talk about before we get up out of here, ESPN dropped their annual top 100 list. Lots of different opinions about this list. A couple people up in arms. Kenyon Martin low-key went viral of sounding off, going crazy about Russell Westbrook being so low. Kyrie Irving has some interesting comments. We'll read those in a second. But before we go crazy and talk about the list itself or complain about what player is where, because I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of complaints. I want us to understand what this list was. So I'm going to just read you the intro that ESPN put out, because I think a lot of people don't be reading in today's day and age. I want to read you the intro that ESPN put out for this list of how they came to the decision-making process of where these players are ranked. All right. To get the final NBA rank prediction, we asked our expert panel to vote on player versus player matchups for more than 15,000 possible pairings. Voters were asked which player will be better in 2023-2024 and had to predict how each player will perform this season. And then it says, note, ESPN's NBA rank panel composed of nearly 150 reporters, editors, producers, and analysts were asked to rank players based on predicted contributions, quality, and quantity for the 2023-2024 season only. And the reason I want to read that is because a lot of people when they see something that feels out of place, they'll take Russell Westbrook at 90-something, for example. I saw people saying they're comparing Russ's career to players who haven't played yet because Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson are on this list ahead of Russ. They're not necessarily doing that. They're predicting what these players will do this upcoming season. And when it comes to predictions, honestly, you can, to an extent, talk yourself into ranking people or players wherever. If you can come up with a valid argument or at least an explanation for why you see it the way you see it, you can make an argument for ranking a player at almost any position. So for me, when these lists come out, whether it be Bleacher Reports, ESPN's, the Ringers, Sports Centers, whoever's, I don't really get up in arms about it. I enjoy reading them. Now, granted, I'm going to be completely transparent. I haven't read this yet. And the reason I'm talking about it now, even though I haven't read it, is because I probably won't talk about it again. Because regardless of where they have players, I'm more so interested in the reasoning of why. I'm more so interested in of what made you come to this conclusion. And so I highly encourage, if anyone has an issue where a player is ranked, because usually what happens is we see a graphic on social and it just has the list of 150 players and you see headshots and numbers, and that's all you see. And you start tweeting about it, you go on your own podcast or somebody else is on their podcast talking crazy. But did you read it? Did you read? Because they, like, literally for every single ranked player, they got at least a couple of sentences explaining why. And then when you get to, like, I know it's at least in the top 10, but I want to say they did it for top 20 as well. There's full paragraphs explaining why they're this way, what made them either drop or go up from last season, how they could potentially go higher this season, you know, if something changes in their prediction, or excuse me, if they play contrary to maybe what the prediction is, and like how that can maybe move them up or down in the rankings. To me at least, it's a good read. I usually read these every year. I don't talk about them every year, but I usually take the time to read these every year because I just like to see what analysts, what other people are thinking. I encourage you to read it. I think it's a good read. I think a lot of people just let it blow out of proportion. And it's interesting, one of the people who let it blow out of proportion in my mind was Kyrie Irving. Kyrie commented under Kyrie Center's ESPN. It's a ESPN. That'd be hilarious. It's a IG page, just like a fan page. And Kyrie Center says ESPN ranked Kyrie as the 34th best player on their top 100 list with the SMH emoji, like the slap of forehead emoji. Kyrie commented underneath, "Who TF cares? I never will. Rankings don't mean a thing in the league, especially not from ESPN or any other of these media platforms. Majority of the analysts are not credible sources in my eyes, and I don't respect them or their opinions." Two things. You cannot care, Kyrie. I would just argue, devil's advocate, little pushback. If you cared, you wouldn't comment that. But that's just me. That's if you didn't care, you wouldn't comment. That's just the way I look at it. So obviously it bothered you a little bit. To me, that's my thoughts. But at the end of the day, it's just a list. And it's a prediction list. I think it's easier to get riled up or mad at a list. And if the list is claiming to rank players based on how they performed during a time span or during either their careers or during a season, during a couple of months, during the playoffs, whatever, it's easier to have a real debate, a real back and forth, really have a conversation about a ranking list if it's based on something that already happened. These lists, these type of lists, they're predictions. I'm not going to get up in arms over somebody's predictions because no one's predictions are ever 100% accurate, because if they were, they'd be millionaires because they'd be betting on FanDuel every single day and they wouldn't be working at ESPN. They would just be billionaires betting at FanDuel, because if people's predictions were 100%, they wouldn't have to work. They would just bet. That's all I got for you guys today. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I do feel like it was a little bit all over the place, but it's the first piece of content I've recorded in a couple of weeks, especially this long form content. It's the first one I've recorded in a couple of weeks. Like I said, we don't have a schedule yet, but I plan on doing this honestly more than once a week, because my goal and plan for this is all my thoughts that I normally have throughout the week, instead of either making separate TikToks for them. And the reason I want to do it more than once a week is sometimes even when we did the lives that were once a week, when you do it once a week, you got to trim the fat, I think, on some of the stuff I want to talk about. There are a lot of ideas in my head that, especially during the regular season, and sometimes I end up trimming the fat and they don't make it into content. But if I do this more than once a week, and maybe not every episode's an hour, maybe a long episode's an hour, but then I just have like 5-6 thoughts I want to rattle off, maybe that episode's 25 minutes. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Like, once again, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, follow me or follow the podcast on the audio platforms. That is much appreciated. And check them out over there if you don't feel like watching my face during the video itself. All right. Appreciate y'all. I'll see y'all next time. This is your boy Hawk, and I'm out. Peace.